Welcome everyone to Smart Water Wednesdays. I am totally excited about today's content. Thank you for joining us. We are going to talk today about the MAD limit switch, which is something that is a frequently discussed and very infrequently fully understood WeatherTrack feature. And I have with me Tony Brucia, who is a contractor out of Park City, Utah, and owns Mountain Water and Irrigation, and was with me just a couple weeks ago. And we came up with this idea, and now it's coming to you live. Tony, thanks for joining.
You got it, Ben.
I am gonna just jump right in. I stopped sharing. That wasn't what I wanted to do. I want to jump right in over here and get to the details of this setting in the WeatherTrack called the MAD limit switch. This is something that is faced with everybody who is programming a controller is faced with. It's right there next to how many stations do you have on your controller. So every user has to run it through their mind. Do I want this MAD limit switch on or off? And almost nobody understands what that means. So today we are going to dive into that. We're going to talk about what it looks like when the MAD limit switch is turned on, as it is here in both of these examples. This is where you find it on the program page on weathertrack.net. This is where you find it on WeatherTrack Mobile. It is also available right at the controller. I didn't catch a picture of that. But this is, when we talk about MAD, the maximum allowable depletion, I'll discuss that in detail coming up. But this feature has gone through many iterations and at some points has been called the sports turf feature. At some points, when you're talking to people on the phone, it gets called everything but the kitchen sink. The water to MAD thingy was my favorite one. And then when it first started, it was called limit watering to target MAD. So in all of the documentation, all the literature, it has different names. So that adds to the confusion about training, right? You'll most frequently see it as MAD limit switch or as the sports turf feature, as that was what it was originally developed to help. All right, so let's take a step back and talk about WeatherTrack basics. The conversation for MAD limit switch starts with auto mode. This is a feature that is only going to affect the stations that you have programmed to auto mode or automated by WeatherTrack, right? When you're doing stuff the WeatherTrack way, we are calculating depletion station by station. That is to say that underneath every station, WeatherTrack thinks that there's a glass of water, and the growing condition for your plant is adequate as long as that glass of water is totally full or 0% deplete. And the growing condition for your plant is adequate until that glass of water gets to be half full. At half full, we've reached what we call our maximum allowable depletion, our MAD, that target MAD that you see in the settings. And that's really where today's conversation is going to focus, is that allowable depletion that the auto mode is calculating to. So just to finish out this conversation, right, to finish out the example, WeatherTrack sees on day one that station one here is totally full, 0% deplete. And so it doesn't need water. That plant has enough water in the soil to stay healthy. So we skip that day and move the depletion forward, right? The next day, you see that that glass of water has had some of the water evaporate out of there. The sun has caused some evaporation. The plant has caused some transpiration and pulled some of the water out of the soil. And so on day two here, we're not at 0% depletion anymore. We'll call that 25% depletion, right? And at 25% depletion, WeatherTrack knows that there's still enough water in the soil profile to take the day off and save that water, to keep that plant healthy and let everything happen naturally, continue to drive those roots down into the soil. So we take the day off and save that water as well. But by day 3, again, the sun has baked some of the water out of the soil. The plant has pulled some of the water out of the soil. And we get to day 3 and we're now at the maximum allowable depletion. We're at that 50% mark, which is the trigger that prompts irrigation and fills that glass of water back up. So this constant balancing of depletion is really what the Automated by WeatherTrack feature does and what WeatherTrack is famous for. Now, understanding that depletion is a key part of understanding the feature called Mad Limit Switch, okay? So Mad Limit Switch was originally devised as a response to sites that qualified in 2 different categories. First of all, it was called Sports Turf feature because it was devised to help sports fields, guys that were managing sports fields, not overwater and make the fields so wet that they were unplayable. So following the depletion model, we saw that sometimes the system delivered more water than a playable field would really like. It was exactly what the plant needed, but the use case was a little bit different. So let me set up kind of how that happened, all right? This is normal behavior. This is where the basics of WeatherTrack live. This is with Mad Limit Switch off, which is the default, which is the way that I recommend 9 times out of 10 the controller should be programmed. And in this example, you see day 1, we lose 30% of our depletion. We knock from 0% down to 30%. We haven't met our 50%, so we're not going to water on day 1. We move to day 2. Another 30% of depletion has accumulated on that station. So when we water on day 2 with the Mad Limit Switch off, when irrigation starts, it is at a 60% depletion. So we're going to water all of that 60% out. We're going to take as thirsty as that station is and water it back to 0, which is what we described in the model. This is what the Mad Limit Switch changes in the program. So when you turn on the Mad Limit Switch, the schedule begins to behave differently, and it tracks that depletion. It tracks the depletion in the same way, but it doesn't apply the irrigation to compensate for it in the same way. So when you turn on that Mad Limit Switch, again, day 1, we get to 30%. No irrigation needs to happen. We're safe in saying that this is the same until day 2. At day 2, we get down to 60%. But what the Mad Limit Switch does is it restricts the irrigation that's happening on site to however much depletion you've got programmed for that station. So in the default mode, all stations come set to the target MAD of 50%. So that's what we used in this example, right? The target MAD is set to 50%. So WeatherTrack knows that we only want to apply that 50% program and then stop, right? We don't want to water back all 60% because that extra 10% in the sports field world was the extra water that was making those fields too slick to play on, right? It wasn't absorbing fast enough. There were wet spots. And so we learned that if we only give a full cycle and nothing more to compensate for that extra depletion, the field was more playable, and we still got a decent round of irrigation. So back to our example, day 1, we don't irrigate. Day 2, we're at 60%. We only water back 50%, right? We don't water it back to 0. We water back to 10%. So the carryover depletion going into day 3 is 10%. And then on day 3, we've had some more ET happen. We've lost some more water to the depletion, right? It drops down to 40%, and we will water, then we'll water out the 40% on day 3. This is different, and this is where the key part of thinking you understand WeatherTrack and what target Mad Limit Switch does to schedules is where it this is where it bounces out of the box, because you're used to waiting until the station passes 50% to water. And when Mad Limit switches on, because it carried depletion over, at the next possible irrigation time, it's going to kick in and irrigate regardless of whether it's at that 50% mark or not. It's going to water out everything that it carried over and everything that accumulated in the day, whether it's 50% or not. So if you're carrying depletion over with Mad Limit switch on, it's never going to skip a day. It's always going to water. It's always going to deliver some irrigation to try and water out that extra piece of mad, that fill that, work as hard as it can to get that glass back to zero. Tony, good place for me to take a breath. Does that so far so good make sense?
Absolutely.
And this is where it got confusing for you, right? As you switched over, it was that water day pattern that was not adding up for you. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So what we did is we weren't using Mad Limit Switch for a sports field application. We were spitballing about this last time we talked because, we've been in a severe drought out here in the Intermountain West. We've luckily gotten some rain, but our reservoirs are still so low. We're still in a huge drought. So, our solution was, okay, we don't really want to, one of our problems with our schools is because of COVID last year, we are now seeing a huge amount of usage on outdoor classroom spaces. So we went into the spring this year with some decimated turf areas that were normally ornamental. So we didn't want to lose them. And we talked to the school district and said, okay, well, we've got to restrict water. So we put on the Mad Limit switch. Okay. And we sat back and we watched. And we saw exactly what you saw, Ben, was yes, we continued because we were still in optimized by WeatherTrack, meaning we were allowing WeatherTrack to optimize out its days of the week. It continued to try to water and make up that depletion on us each and every day. And we had water authorities complaining to us saying, hey guys, we're still seeing sprinklers running every single day. So it dawned on us that, okay, this is the issue. And that math that you showed, we figured that out. And we said, okay, this is what it's actually doing. So for our application.
Wait, don't give away the ending. Don't. Let me stop you right there, because okay. I want to come back to that. I want to revisit how you're using it. After we get to the finish line on the explanation of how it was designed, because I think
it works. It did what it was supposed to do, but for what we wanted it to do, we were scratching our heads.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Like if you're used to the way that WeatherTrack behaves, when you turn on that Mad Limit switch, it seems to obey a different set of rules, because it does obey a different.
Well, what we expected to see soaring depletions. We expected to see where we didn't expect it to make it up, I guess, is what we didn't expect. Is we didn't expect and understand that it would carry over that additional 10-20% to the next water cycle and then make it up. So where we had zones that would normally only require water, say every 2 to 3 days, yeah, they were watering every day, because once they had got into this little depletion cycle, it was kind of like this little we were calling it a mad game of catch up, where that's what was happening. And it took us about a week or two to figure it out and understand what was going on.
A perfect lead in to the more advanced application slide. So we go back to sharing my screen here. So now this is where we get into kind of synthesizing what it looks like in the way it was designed, right? The way it was designed is sports turf in an environment where there are water restrictions that only allow a few days a week, right? And so what they were seeing was, with 2 back-to-back non-water days, they would get to a 90% depletion on a station before it was allowed to water. And so with that, of course, WeatherTrack is going to apply, or when Mad Limit switch is off, we're going to apply all 90% of that back to zero, right? We're going to run that sprinkler system for almost twice what a full program would look like, a 50% program would look like, to make up for the excess depletion that station has accumulated, which is right by the model. It's behaving the way it should, but it does create long run times that then make that slippery surface and make the sports field unplayable. And so when we play that out in longhand, with the mad limit switch on, we have those 2 water days, 2 non-water days where we accumulate that 90%. And with our target mad on this station set to 50%, we're only going to water that 50% out in any one irrigation program. And so we go from 90% back to 40%, and then we add the days irrigation and it bounces down to 70, and then we apply 50% again, and that only takes us to 20%. So it is constantly making adjustment after adjustment and carryover after carryover, and it makes it, in my eyes, it follows the model. And if you understand what the model is doing, it makes sense. But if you don't understand what the model is doing, it makes no sense. It just causes more confusion than anything else. So from a product specialist position, from the training position, I always tell people, if you don't need mad limit switch, if you aren't a sports turf in a water restricted area, it's not for you. Just keep it off and water normal irrigation the way it's designed. However, Tony proved me wrong on that, because Tony started using this mad limit switch in a unique and novel way that I had never even thought about before. Because what Tony was seeing was, in his water restriction, what he's charged with is trying to keep plants alive in a drought and still dramatically reduce the amount of water that those plants are getting. And in auto mode, it doesn't really do that. You can apply water day restrictions, but if it's at a 90% depletion, it's going to water out 90%. It's going to just keep adding minutes on the days that it doesn't irrigate and when it can irrigate, it makes all of that up. So it's about a wash, really. It really applies about the same amount of water, whether you're in water restrictions or not. And Tony wanted to manage that, which is awesome. And so to do that, he used the mad limit switch. That's where I'm going to hand it over to you, Tony, and describe what your process was and what you found, both in terms of performance and results.
Well, what we figured out was, once we figured out that we needed to get it off of Optimized by WeatherTrack, because again, it would just never stop trying to catch itself up. So how do you restrict it? You got to choke it back, is what we thought. So what we did is we just went back to conventional days. We just said, hey, you can only water Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay. Even there, what we saw was, because we had that buy day, that model that you showed, when we did have that return water day on the 3rd, it'd try like heck to try to make it up, but it could only go to 50%. So we kept seeing our depletion soaring, which is what we wanted to do. Certain properties, and I think this is an interesting one. I mean, this is not necessarily mad related, but this is just good stuff for guys for drought. I don't think anybody really understands how hard their properties can take it without water until you really turn them off. And I say that because what we did is we said, look, if we really want to kick this thing into high gear, because we were getting complaints out of water authorities, we just shut down, Ben. We shut the clocks off for 3 days, okay, and let the depletion go through the roof. Left the mad limit switch on, gave it its day, but it could only come back that 50%. So we're only able to give it a conventional amount of watering time without having to go through and reprogram literally 500-600 or more stations on some, across our school districts to go to user no ET mode, which, then I'm trying to go all the way back to conventional. And I have, if I want to revert, then I'm doing a restore program. So we wanted to do it this way. The other thing that we did is we started doing conservation days. So we started using user event pause, and we just said, okay, if we walked on a property and we thought that even though it was restricted to say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if my guy got there and said, I'm going to give it another day off, we'd just set an event pause. So instead of turning the controller off, we'd do a pause, or we'd do a rain pause, one or the other. Either one will do the same. We still accrue our depletion, but when we get to our next cycle back, we're not on a rain pause, but only on our user event pause. But on our user event pauses, when we do get back to our next watering cycle, again, we're only coming back with that 50%. So right now I've got stations that are, 150 some odd. The WeatherTrack thinks they're depleted out of their mind, but from boots on the ground, no, they're not. They're what we want. We do want to see some brown spots. We do want to see some yellowing. No one wants to see vibrant green turf right now in our town. It's kind of like a no-no. So that's kind of how we've been doing it.
I love it. So from my chair, what I see is you using the mad limit switch to get a healthy amount of irrigation down based on all of the variables that the scheduling engine
That's it.
manages, right? You're getting the right root depth and the right precip rate, and you're getting a scientifically calculated irrigation schedule, but you're not watering it all out. You're just getting one full cycle and leaving the excess off of the table.
If we think about like the way that the optimization works, if we start to think about what does a 50% fill the water cup mean, if your data is right, and if you've got your program profile right, that's the equivalent to basically putting down a rainstorm on your property, returning a normal amount of water. Now, not a deluge, but a decent amount of water. Do I need to water beyond that? No, because I can't afford to at this point. So I'm giving the point, I don't want to overwater, but I don't want to underwater at the same time. But, that leads me to the other trick is, so when we look at allowable depletion, which is one of your program pieces that you can put in, if we change the allowable depletion, we can actually restrict the mad limit switch. So where in your model, you're showing that you are only allowing it to go back to 50%. Well, if we change that allowable depletion on a zone to say 40%, when it returns to the water day and is allowed to water, now it's only going to water 40% of my cup. So another further way, and when I was saying about how far can you go on your properties, we have one particular school district to where whoever was the contractor, the landscaper that built the place, they followed the spec. There is 8-10 inches of topsoil underneath the lawns. We were dumbfounded. We had that property where we'd shut it off for 5 days and you'd come back and it would still look green. You'd be like, how possible? And soils and root depth. So from a manager's perspective, I think going through a drought is a good thing because it kind of teaches you how far can you go, and how tight can you make your systems. We've been using WeatherTrack for over 5 years on some of these properties. And we've kind of gotten a little lazy in a way, a little more complacent, saying, oh, it's such a good system, it's doing what we want. But after doing what we've done with the mad limit switch and restricting our days and doing what we've been doing, we've been able to see that we can go harder. We can cut back water usage even further, and that this is another way to do it.
Awesome. I love it. So let's talk about that detail, right? That detail in programming that Tony was talking about is this station by station setting for mad limit switch or target mad. The target mad can be set from 20% to 80%. We recommend for WeatherTrack applications that 50% really is our sweet spot. And you can use that for the fully automated. But in this application, what Tony's talking about is if you want to run with this mad limit switch management and further limit the amount of water that a station is getting, you can shallow up your target mad setting, right? So it comes default to 50%. But if you go in and you're running this type of conservation, right, that changes this number. If you change that target mad from 50% to 40%, then when irrigation happens, it's not going to water back 50%. It's going to take that station level target mad and apply that as what it delivers that night. So that is a big piece of managing this way. Is understanding kind of how to find the balance, how to make sure you're getting what you need without getting too much or too little. Another thing that we talked about in the pre-show, Tony, was management of days and times and allowable windows, which you've already touched on. Do you have anything else to say about how?
Yeah, the other thing you can do is tighten your windows. You can just tighten them up. You can, so instead of saying, even if your water restriction says you're allowed to water from say 8 p.m. through 8 a.m., go tighter. Don't go on till 10 and shut off at 6. And especially on your OptiFlow controllers, you'll see it. You'll see on your graph, how it's going to dump time from each and every one of your zones. So you can scrape off even more time and scrape off even more water by shortening up your windows as well. Yeah. So, and then again, we really like just kind of doing the conservation day thing, because it was a good one for our superintendents to be able to go, oh, it's conservation day, you know, so all water is off, you know what I mean? And, you know, sure enough, we've got it as an event. So it's doing the same thing as if I just shut another day off, but we did it that way just because it kind of makes a little bit of a public statement.
I like it.
Yeah. So and it's also just a way we can control it, because, you know, again, we've been managing on the fly this year. We've been a harder water management year this year than it's ever been. And again, years past, we've been able to be a little bit more complacent. Years like this, you can't. I mean, phone rings, you've got to be responsive and you've got to have a right answer.
Yep. So the one thing that I did want to bring up is the management of that current depletion, right? When you're managing this way, it throws off the idea of the standard current depletion. We're still tracking it, but managing excess depletion so it doesn't carry over, so it doesn't build up, so it doesn't get out of control is something that I would recommend, right? You want to make sure that you're far enough along that you get a full irrigation cycle. So somewhere beyond 50 when it is prompted irrigation. But if you're up at 125% depletions, sometimes I just like to set those back. And so just as a reminder, you can do that here on the manage page in a couple of different ways. You can do it station by station on the manage page by selecting the stations that you want to reset and preview the changes and then save and send. We've also just recently added this station depletion to the app. So it is on the station settings on WeatherTrack Mobile. And so if you're battling super high depletions and you just see that in the program, if you're managing this way, I recommend just keeping an eye on those things. And when they get super high, when they get above 100%, set them back to 50 just to keep everything kind of in balance.
Yeah, you can also do that just to stop the emails if you want, Ben. So if you're getting the depletion emails, we'll just go back and reset and then just do another event pause and just let it go back. And then I don't get the emails for a couple of days.
Right. And those station high depletions, if we go back to the original slide when we were talking about how auto mode works, whether you've got mad limit switch on or not, when you pass that 75% or 70% depletion mark, you get that station high depletion alert. And that is an annoyance for a lot of people. That's why I bring up manually managing the depletion levels and keeping your eye on that current depletion, both on weathertrack.net and on WeatherTrack Mobile now. All right, Tony, this is the part of the show that I forgot to warn you about. So this is going to be coming right off the top of your head. So I always ask the special guest a question at the end of the show. Last time I asked you, what does WeatherTrack save you? But for second time guests, you get the question, what is your favorite WeatherTrack feature?
My favorite WeatherTrack feature.
Sorry, I should have warned you about that one. I know that's a big question.
I would say between manually being able to run zones from the mobile app or turning on master valve, any of the stuff I can do from my phone when the landscapers call me, and I don't have to drive to a job site. I'd say any of those. And what was it this morning? So they're at the high school and they're sodding today and they wanted the quick coupler on. So I can just do an MV override and sit here and talk to you and not have to drive over there and do it. So I would say that. I would say the mobile connectivity to your controllers is the biggest thing. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense, right? In real-time management, the ability to have features in your pocket to anywhere from anywhere can save just a ton of time.
Oh, it's a ton of time. Yeah. And I think that's what I was on last time was time. Everything's time. Never have enough time.
Never have enough time. And so we're trying to find ways to make it more efficient for you. So Tony, thank you so much.
You got it, man.
We'll finish out. You've seen the slide. You've seen the support slide. We're always here to help. Call customer service. Call me. HydroPoint has your back. And until next week, we will see everyone at Smart Water Wednesdays next week. Thank you so much.
Got it. Thanks, Ben.